Hey everyone, this is Griever here, bringing you a 7 Deadly Sins discussion video. Not so much a theory video this time, more of a discussion and to shed some light on the time frame involving Elizabeth's death to reincarnation. Like, how long does it take? Because during my chapter 250 review, I was unsure of this statement because this dates back to chapter 222, where Zeldris states that Elizabeth's memories come back. She has 3 days, and this reincarnation, death, 3 days, death thing has happened roughly 40 or 50 times. He didn't give us an exact number, even though Meliodas knew exactly how many Elizabeths he had been with, being 107. So it wasn't necessarily completely stated how long it takes, but going back through and checking, and after I had a few comments about this on my chapter 250 review, I decided to just clear the air and go through since roughly about chapter 150 and go all the way up to the current, read the last 100 chapters and really make sure I didn't miss any key point. And that being said, I just want to now bring up that I believe it's only about a day at the most. Maybe a couple of days, but it could be anywhere from instantaneously all the way to only a few days. And here's why. So let's start with the earliest chapter that brings us some evidence regarding this. That was the end of chapter 181 and the better half of 182, where Zarathustra, of course, is used his druid magic on Meliodas so that Elizabeth and Zarathustra can go and see what happened 16 years ago. Exactly. 16 years ago was the destruction of Danafor, and when Zarathustra and Bartra first met Meliodas. Now, from this, we can deduce right away that Zarathustra and Bartra had gone there to investigate, of course, one of the visions, which is Bartra's magical power. One of the visions and prophecies that he had foreseen was the destruction, the nightmare that was Danafor. So, and we know, of course, that Danafor is the place that Fraudrin was released in, and that Liz, the Elizabeth, the 106th Elizabeth reincarnation, the one right before the current one, was born, and that's where she died, and that's the thing that affected, of course, Meliodas getting his powers back from the druid and the current death and all those things. But from this, we can gather the fact that Meliodas is walking out of the ruins of Danafor, and you would think that that would have spread very, very quickly. He's still beaten up, bruised, still wearing the Danafor uniform here, and is carrying an infant Elizabeth. So from this, for me anyways, this makes it almost concrete, because the amount of time between Liz dying in Danafor, which happened at the destruction of Danafor, and the time it would take for Zarathustra and Bartra to show up, and probably, now this is where the conjecture comes in, it's likely that Bartra and Zarathustra were already on their way from Leonis before the destruction, because that is the point of Bartra's visions. He sees them before they happen, things before they happen, not, as they're happening, or things that happened in the past. He sees the future in these things, and sometimes they're shrouded in mystery, but that's the general gist. So they were probably already on their way. How many days do you guys think were really in between? And remember that Meliodas is still bloodied, still beaten, still wearing the Danafor uniform. There's still the gaping hole where Danafor was. So that to me says that it probably happens after a day. It could be like the rise of the sun, the following sun does it, something like that. This is further confirmed in chapter 221 because Liz, of course, died 16 years ago at Danafor, and Meliodas was found in the ruins of Danafor with her 16 years ago. This is brought up when Elizabeth is concerned about, and this is before chapter 222, of course, where Elizabeth finds out about the reincarnation and the multiple Elizabeths. She's asking Meliodas personally because she realizes, okay, wait a minute, I've heard about this goddess Elizabeth, 3,000 years ago, and I've heard about, Liz and stuff, and everyone says, looks strikingly like me, sounds like me and stuff, so what's going on? So she brings up the fact that it was exactly 16 years ago. Now, of course, Elizabeth may or may not know the exact time. Saying exactly 16 years ago, 16 years can be, all of 11 months, X number of days, so there might be a little discrepancy there, but it's further boosting the fact, with the keyword being exactly, is that it probably happened very, very close in time frame there. in chapter 224, Meliodas tells, of course, the history of their curse and such, and brings up the fact that this is the current 107th Elizabeth and stuff. Now, at the end of this, of course, chapter 247 brings us a Q&A from Suzuki Nakaba, where it says that a question was posed that has every Elizabeth died from the 3-day thing and the curse, or I believe the question was actually said, have they all gotten their memories back before, all 107 of them? And he stated as an answer, no, some of them have died from old age before, indicating that they don't all necessarily get their memories back. And of course, we've seen that around the chapter, I believe it was chapter 221, right before, after the conversation Meliodas and Elizabeth had about Liz and the whole 16 years exactly, Meliodas is stated to say, like, you might be ready. I mean, he says this to himself, but Elizabeth stated, I'm ready for the truth. I want the truth. I want to know. I want to remember all these things. Like, I'm ready for it. Meliodas looks up at the clouds and states, but I'm not. So this indicates to me that he chooses to live out his life with these Elizabeths every single time, these 100+ Elizabeths, as long as he can. He's not willing to tell her all about it, get her for 3 days with all her memories intact just to lose her after 3 days. No, he wants them to live full lives. He still wants to be with Elizabeth because it's the same person. In essence, it's still her soul and her personality and her in another body, and she might not recognize him and remember everything they've done, but it's still her at the end of the day. So he's not going to sacrifice, every time, like the current Elizabeth is only 16, maybe 17 soon, but right now she's only 16. He doesn't want her to die at 16. He doesn't want her to die at all. So he's going to probably stretch that as far as he can. So that makes more sense that plenty of them would die from old age, assuming nothing bad befell them, as long as she doesn't fully regain her memories. Now, it's left a little ambiguous as to what may or may not trigger, because clearly not all of them died from old age or disease or whatever. Unlikely disease, really, because she's still a goddess technically, and disease, and they all seem to represent healing. I mean, the second Elizabeth represented the fact that she had the eye, and the goddess eye, and had the power of healing, as does the current Elizabeth. So it's fair to say that most of the or all of the Elizabeth reincarnations all have the goddess healing ability. And it was stated in another Q&A question by Suzuki Nakaba that someone asked, do they die from disease or whatever? How powerful is a goddess healing? And he stated that the goddess healing effect, it's very, very rare. He didn't say impossible, but this is why it's very, very rare for a goddess to die from illness or disease, because their healing is bar none almost absolute. They can virtually heal everything but death. They have the capacity to heal nearly everything. So that brings up the fact that, of course, she would only basically die from old age. Old age, accidents, or the 3-day curse would be basically the only 3 ways that she could die. I mean, she could be murdered and stuff, but Meliodas being by her side, it's quite unlikely. Outside of his power to stop the curse, it's unlikely that any other harm would come to her via accidents, murders, things like that. Now, that should clear up most of the information for this video. The fact of the matter is that Elizabeth is reincarnated within the day. I believe it's likely a whole sunrise thing or something like that. Like once the next day, like exactly 12:01 the next day is when the next one will be reincarnated, born. Do they pop out of thin air? I mean, Danafor was completely destroyed. Does it happen the moment Liz died? Did Elizabeth get reborn? That's still up for debate, especially with Meliodas losing his shit and completely leveling and making a Grand Canyon out of Danafor. You'd think he'd be a little more cautious. I mean, by this point he knows, that how Elizabeth is reborn and such. So this begs the question as to is the baby born out of like Liz's dead body or something? Like, does Liz's dead body go into a cocoon state and out pops the baby or something? Like, what happens? It's very hard to say. But other than that, it's pretty concrete here. Now, the only other question to really pose here is about the 106th Elizabeth, being, of course, Liz, the Danafor Elizabeth. And did she die from the curse? Did Fraudrin murder her before the curse, before she gained her memories back? Or was Fraudrin's murder the end of the 3 days? This one's a little more difficult because it's unlikely, as why would Liz's particular Elizabeth, the 106th, affect Meliodas so much to the point that her death is so significant? That's what tormented him. He relived Liz's death constantly to get his power back from the Druids, his full potential back, his full power. Why would that be the case? Why would he need... why would this one be the particular? Wouldn't it be the first one? Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't it be the first death of Elizabeth, the goddess Elizabeth? Or not even that. Wouldn't he be remembering all 106 now, currently? But I know that this information had not been dropped at that point when we knew about, when Meliodas was going to get his powers back and he had to relive to try to control his wrath from, failing to protect Liz. At that point, it was nowhere near confirmed that there was multiple Elizabeths and multiple reincarnations and reborns and all this stuff. And Nakaba Suzuki might have wanted to, not given away that information. But if that was the case, it shouldn't have been so heavily shown that he was reliving that one moment over and over and over. So some people have said, and I believe even the Wikipedia page for Liz says in the trivia below, that it's likely that Fraudrin's murder of Liz was the 3-day curse and Liz did have her memories. I think that's unlikely because otherwise he wouldn't relive it. I think that this one affected him the most because Liz's death he wasn't able to protect her. The curse is outside his control. Old age is outside his control. The reborn and all that stuff is outside his control. But he allowed Fraudrin to get the better of him and murder Elizabeth, the 106th Elizabeth, before he was prepared, before he was ready. He should have been able to prevent that. Liz should have been able to live far longer, and that's why it torments him so much that at this point, you got to remember, this is the 106th. He's been through this for about 3,000 years at this point. And for, at this point to be starting to go backwards, like, I'm sure he's thinking at this point, at this point now, I'm nowhere near, after 106 Elizabeths, I'm nowhere near to breaking this curse and ending this cycle. I'm even backtracking. I'm going backwards now. I can't even protect the reincarnations that do come here before they gain their memories. Like, he's going backwards. This one may have had a more profound effect. That, to me, makes more sense than the alternative that she gained her memories and that was the death. Otherwise, it was just kind of weird for him to relive that one moment with that one Elizabeth as the reason as he couldn't control his wrath. That seems a little... My theory, I think, that it's unlikely that, she had her memories back and Fraudrin's murder was Meliodas' failure. Makes a lot more sense to me as to why Liz was singled out amongst all the other Elizabeths, then, because he's seen them all die eventually, then particularly the fact that, this was just the latest one, and that was, okay, I'll forget 105, but 106's death, that's the one that's locking away my powers. Had Elizabeth Leonis died before this, he would have just been reliving that one and forget about Liz. No, see, that breaks character, that doesn't make sense. That's not what his character's about. So, anyways, yeah, a little off topic there as well for the remainder of this video, but I thought I'd like to pose that question to you guys. Do you guys think that Liz had her memories at the time of, the time of her death at Danafor, or was that Fraudrin's blatant murder before she gained her memories back, and that's why Meliodas was so affected by her death? Anyways, guys, that's the conclusion to this video. That was just to clear the air and make set the record straight onto what I've been able to research and what I've been able to find. That basically concludes that it's very, very little. There's a very little gap of time in between the death of an Elizabeth and the reborn, the reincarnation of the next one. It's very, very little time. You can argue from instantaneous to a couple of days, but that's at most. I think this basically all the information I've provided and evidence concludes that very very easily, ties it up in a nice, neat little bow. But anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know once again about what you think about Liz having her memories or not at the time of her death. In the comment section below. I always like to hear from you guys. Thank you for all the views, the subscribers, and the comments, the likes. Really appreciate it all. And this has been Griever with 7 Deadly Sins discussion. I hope to do a few more of these as questions are posed to me and discussions are brought up. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have an idea for another video for me to do, please post in the comments below. With that being said, we'll see you next time, guys. Peace out.